All right, so we're pretty excited today to have Rob Hahn here to chat with us about what we see going on right now in 2020 and coming in, or I guess 2021 now, what we
Yeah.
saw in 2020, what we're
Yeah.
seeing coming in 2021. Rob Hahn is the founder and managing partner of 7DS Associates, a strategy consulting firm specializing in creative solutions rooted in strategic analysis and data. With a varied background from finance, corporate law, technology, product development, media, entertainment, startups, fashion, even a professional card player, Rob brings a unique perspective to business problems. He started in real estate as a specialized commercial real estate firm who invested in airplane hangars. Rob moved from there onto Realogy, where he headed the interactive marketing for Coldwell Banker Commercial. He writes the well-known blog Notorious ROB, which is who he is, Notorious, where he opines on topics, real estate technology, marketing, and strategy. He is a prolific speaker at industry events such as Inman Connect, T3 Summit, local, state, and national association events. He's also been named to the Inman 100 Most Influential People. Rob Hahn, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Trev. You did that. That was a great dramatic reading. Like, dang.
He's going to need a minute to recover, I think, now. We'll have to keep this going. It's just going to be you and I for a little while.
I know, right? And
Yeah,
Aurea left out my whole thing about like I'm available for bar mitzvahs and weddings, and but it's all good.
Well, see, I didn't know who wrote that bio, so I wasn't sure if that was Rob approved. So I was like, we'll just
we'll give it a go.
They left out a bunch of the stuff, I think. So yeah, great to chat with you guys. Looking forward to having this conversation. Hopefully it'll be fun. Hopefully it'll be somewhat useful and entertaining and interesting to your peoples,
It's always super fun. And, the two things people do in January is you make some New Year's resolutions where you're going to stop doing some bad stuff. You're going to start doing some bad stuff probably as well. And you also, you maybe look back on some of the predictions you had from the year before. And I was poking through some of the things that you put out. And I read your historical statistics, usually not too bad. And I think this year we can all agree it's a swing and a miss for you.
For sure.
For anybody that made a prediction, this was the year that was going to break the trend. And
for sure. I mean, I went 0 for 7 and it is what it is.
It is what it is. So the last time we were together, was in February, end of February at the Aurea conference. And life was good. Life was normal. We were going to conferences. We were talking about growth. We were talking about, market factors that were all supposed to work, and that all broke. And so do you think there's any underlying things that aren't broken that are still working through the pandemic, through all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so things are, I guess my general high level thesis on this is what the pandemic really did is it's kind of really accelerated trends that we've been seeing for like 10 years, right? So because none of the stuff was like brand new, right? Like Zoom, like this existed,
right?
Like for years and years and years. It's just very few people used it,
unless you were doing tech support for like your computer or something, right?
Exactly. Or you were
how it was being used.
Startup that was like all into like WebEx, whatever collaboration stuff. Things like video tours. It's not like they were, like somebody invented. Like this stuff existed. 3D tours existed. Digital signatures. We've been using that for how long, right? The technology to do things like remote notarization existed for years and years. It's just there wasn't a need to do any of that. So what the pandemic did is it just took a lot of these trends and just accelerated them, right? I don't feel like there's anything like brand new, like we'd never seen this before come into being during, the whole situation. But, so it's not that things were broken that way. Things were broken in that like all of our assumptions just had to be thrown out the window, right? For a lot of things.
Do you think they're delayed, or do you think it's a whole new set of stuff?
What do you mean, a range?
So you had some assumptions last year. You had some, some good guesses. Do you think some of those things, you were talking about mergers, you were talking about bankruptcies, you're talking about, is that just moved forward 12 months, or is that like shuffle the deck completely?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been predicting Redfin and Open Door merging for what, like 3 years now.
Yeah,
it never happens.
Is that when you just keep saying
right?
it? Yeah, if you just keep saying it, it'll happen, right?
That's right. I just figure it's just a matter of time. I think that's largely part of it, but there are some new, I think, developments that were unexpected last year that potentially impacts things going into next year, right?
Can you share a few of those with us?
Yeah, and so most of this is obviously United States, right? But
Right.
the way I've always thought about Canada and US is, we have the same legal system more or less, right? We have very similar. We have the same sort of realtor system. We have cooperation compensation. Our mortgage systems are more or less similar. So from a kind of a residential real estate standpoint, like we're sisters, right? Whereas it's really hard to compare, say, what's happening in here to Australia or the UK or vice versa. There's not a whole lot we can learn from what's happening in UK, just like there's not a whole lot that some Aussie can learn from what's happening in the States. So having said that, I think the two biggest developments last year, I would say one is the fact that the lawsuit was not only not dismissed, right? So, and by the lawsuit, I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, there's a huge class action lawsuit happening in the US, basically saying that the practice of sharing commissions with a buyer agent is anti-competitive. It is a violation of US antitrust law. And when it was first filed, I thought this was a pretty serious thing. Most people are like, oh, whatever, NAR is very, very powerful. They have lots of money and there's no basis to any of this. So they'll get it dismissed. And it's like, no, I don't think they're going to get this dismissed. So that was not dismissed. But not only was it not dismissed, it's pretty clear that the judge, at least in one of the two cases, is more or less made up her mind. That's how I look at it. So the challenge as we go into trial is going to be have to convince her the other, you know what I mean? Like, it's more difficult to persuade someone to think something than to persuade somebody to stop thinking something. So I think that's a huge one. And at the same time, our Department of Justice got pretty heavily involved, and there was a big lawsuit that they filed against NAR and then immediately entered into settlement with, right? And we don't have to get into some of the details of that. The big picture, why this is important is, it seems clear to me that kind of the policymakers and, the government and, judges and sort of the economists, all of the sort of the intellectual elite, right, that help inform how we as a government, as we as society is going to look at this, they've pretty much, I feel like, have decided that commission sharing, cooperation compensation is bad. And I think they're going to come after it. And the question is, will they be successful or not? No one knows. My sense is that they're probably going to be successful at trial. I don't know if they'll succeed.
At least in the middle, right? Maybe they'll get to a yes verdict or a no verdict, but there will be a change in your mind. Something is going to change as a result.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, it's going to change. And the question is whether on appeal, right, whether we could win. That one you just don't know. But at trial, I think the plaintiffs are going to win that, and the Department of Justice is just sitting there waiting for something to happen.
So there's sort of an attack on two fronts, right? To the realtor, to organized real estate. One is the commission compensation. The other is employee independent contractor designation. Like all kind of coming together at the same time. And you have brokerages like Rex and others that are, sort of successfully navigating a new world. And, how do you feel all that's playing out?
So that stuff is things that we've noticed. So again, so this is another case of where nothing's been broken. It's just accelerated trends, right? So the independent contractor versus W-2 thing has been going on for, I don't know, 10 years, right? Do I think that 2021 is the year when we really see that take off? Not necessarily. I'm not sold on that. But what it has kind of shown is because of the way things are being done digitally, because of some of the remoteness, because of the way that real estate has to be done via technology, the firms that kind of embrace that W-2 model, I think, have major advantages, right? And I think we saw that with Redfin and their performance, Rex and its performance, even though they're not public, so we don't really know. But really the important piece there is agent teams and their performance, right? So like one of my overriding thesis as of last year is, okay, given what's happened, I now have a new kind of master thesis, if you will. If you guys remember Oria, and it wasn't like I wasn't talking about this stuff. It said, this is the age of capital, right? That was my whole thing last year. And then COVID happens, all this stuff. I still think capital is super important. I still stand by a lot of that. but I think the driving force is a little bit different. Now I feel like the future of real estate is about teams, period, end of story. And so therefore I start to evaluate everything in the industry on that basis. Like, are you pro team? Are you anti-team? Does your success rely on teams? Does it not? Like, does your business model, is it team friendly? Is it not? And I think based on that, I just make snap decisions. That you've got problems if you're not, dealing with that as a concept, right? As a consequence. So,
and some big brands still aren't embracing that model, still are struggling to get their arms around it, right?
Well, and it's not that they don't want to, it's that they can't, right? Because they don't, like, teams eviscerate brokerages. I mean, that's just the bottom line, right? If you look at what happens to brokerage profitability as a result of teams, like, it's, yeah, of course, no wonder, right? And I know some brokers say that's not true. I use teams for this, that, and I'm like, sure. I mean, show me your books, right? I just don't believe it. I don't buy it, right? And those teams, if you look at them, they function a lot like a W-2 type model, even if they're 1099, right?
Right.
They can say, you are going to come into the office at 8 o'clock in the morning and spend 2 hours making phone calls. You don't like it, get the fuck out. I mean, they have that level of control that brokers simply don't have, right?
So I wonder if teams are at the most exposure for that independent contractor versus.
Absolutely, right.
Right. If it cascades down, it'll be interesting to see if they watch where they'll just say they'll cut it off there and say maybe the brokerage is, these guys are all crazy and wild, but the teams seem to have a real good handle on what's going on. So if you're 3 or more, you're in trouble, right? It could be.
Yeah. And I've been saying that for a few years now, Jody, that, look, I think this W-2 1099 thing, it's not something that brokers have to worry about. It's what team owners have to worry about. And they're like, oh, I don't need to worry about that. Okay. If you say so, I don't, no one's sued yet. So I guess we won't know, but that's just something I've been saying for years. I think because what happened last year, and why I'm saying, why is COVID, why is any of that important, is because if you have to do things in much more technologically sort of unified fashion, then there's a huge advantage if you could work like a firm, like a company, as opposed to a bunch of, independent contractor cowboys running around, right? And so I think, and some of the stats I've seen, some of the things, some of the numbers that I've researched, it seems to me teams grew a whole lot during 2020, right? Whereas individual agents and some of the less productive agents, like, they lost market share, right? And teams have had some of the best years that they've ever seen. That's what my numbers show. I don't know what you guys have experienced in Canada. I mean, does that fit in with kind of your experience, your take?
Matt, maybe this is up your alley. Yeah, Matt is sitting in a brand new office with a brand new team and a brand new logo and a brand new outlook. It's everywhere. I think it's in all markets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think having that team format allows the team to do more. Right. So I've heard you speak about this numerous times, and it's, I think, helped form my way of thinking. Maybe I'm polluted by you, but for me, that 100%, I think you can't go wrong with that.
Right.
So
I think that's kind of an impact, and then there's a bunch of things that cascade down from that, right? But so you got the 10-9, you got that, and then you got the commission. But there is something about this that's really, really relevant to organized real estate, right? And the relevance to me is very simple, which is whether we're talking about Canada or we're talking about the United States, the number one problem, so not the trend, but the problem that the industry faces is the fact that we have too many incompetent people running around, trying to do this stuff. I mean, that's been the case for 20 years? And we really just haven't solved it. And I feel like to a large extent, what the COVID thing does is it might accelerate that, right? Because I feel like it's going to be way harder when you have to do everything digitally, when you have to go remote to do business if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not competent, right? So what are you supposed to do?
But business has never been better.
Business has never been better for the great agents, right? Okay. And at least the data I've seen, at least the conversations I've had, if you're top 10, 20% agent, oh my God, business has never been better. You're making money hand over fist. If you're in the bottom 40%, the numbers I'm seeing is like they're suffering pretty hard, right? Because a lot of the stuff that they might have done in the past, in other words, the so-called I don't know what y'all call it up here. Maybe it's hockey moms. Down here, it's called soccer moms, right? It's like where you're just kind of part-time, you're hanging out, and like one of your friends says, hey, you know what's happening? And then you kind of get a listing that way. Like that just doesn't happen because nobody's going to the soccer field anymore. Nobody's hanging out. There's no socialization. There's no, that's gone. So either you're intentional and doing the outreach and doing the stuff that like teams do, that great agents do. You know, if you're waiting for a sort of a thing to kind of fall in your lap, at least the numbers I've seen, conversation I've had, those people are suffering and hard. Again, I don't know if that's true with you guys, you know?
Well, but you look at the models. I mean, you're talking about, you know, what do we do about this? I think when my dad started real estate in the 70s, you know, he applied to a couple of brokerages and waited for a callback when they had a desk and a phone and a phone book and a reverse street address directory lookup thing so he could do the business. And we went from there to, you know, recruit. I think a brokerage, they, you know, if they're not saying it, they're doing it. Recruit, and see what sticks. There's no, and so what that means is, to me, is the team fills the culture void, because when you'll hire anyone, when you're in a recruit mode and you want to fill the seats and build it out, eventually you can lose track and lose the culture. And the team goes back to, what are we about? What's the core values with our little group? And you can control that, because it's less motivating to just add. If you add one bad apple to 5 or 6 or 10, that's really bad. You feel that. When you add it to 1,600, 1,000, 500 people, you know, okay, that's okay. Your system can manage.
Not only that, but if you're adding it to an environment where the expectation is you're all lone rangers, right? So, in other words, if I have a small brokerage, I could talk my culture till I'm blue in the face. But if I have 10 agents, but each of them say, hey, you're your own little business, go get some leads and then close those leads, work those leads and close those leads. Who cares? In a team context, it's rarely that way, right? In a team context, hopefully it's more like, here's the team lead. You're going to do this piece, and then you're going to pass it to this person who's going to do this piece. There's much more of a codependency. So yeah, I think having a bad apple in that environment sucks, right? Okay. But if you don't have that environment, I'm like, you're not a team, right? You're just I don't know what you are. You're like a small boutique brokerage. If your team's focus is just recruit and retain, like, I guess, right? Then I don't know what the difference is, right? So anyway, to me, that's like the biggest thing to look out within the industry, right? What happens to teams, and relative to teams, what happens to the value of things like brokerages, franchises, MLSs, associations, all of that, And just give an example.
You're leading me right into it. I mean, the Ottawa Real Estate Board is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. That's 100 years of providing value in the community here. And I'm wondering about your take on MLSs, because your lens might be slightly different. The MLS story and the developments in the last few decades in the States has kind of taken a different path. But I think they're all under the same pressure. And I think somewhere between technology and brokerages and brands and competition and stuff is going to be a challenge for MLSs. I'm wondering,
for sure,
if you see that or not, or how, what are they going to adjust to do the right thing for the right people, in the next year or 10?
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest issues with the MLS is, like I said, like we were talking about how we began this whole commission lawsuit, right? So, I mean, most of my clients are MLSs. So my big thing to them last year has been, let's say cooperation compensation goes away. Let's say the courts say this is illegal, you can't do this anymore. Or some, Department of Justice, or in your case, like the Competition Bureau comes out and says, okay, guys, no more sharing commissions, right? Let's say that happens. The challenge is, if you're the MLS, what's your value? If you don't have that anymore, what is the value that you're offering that people will keep signing up, right? And the answer typically is going to be, well, we have all the data, right? Like that, okay, that's a fine answer. But then you have to go, okay, if that's your value, whether it's in terms of data quality, data quantity, speed of access, tools, technology, customer service, how do you compare to other data providers, right? In other words, if you look at just data providers, there are a bunch of companies out there that provide data, right?
Sure.
I don't know, take like Carfax. Carfax provides data.
Sure.
And the question is, how do you compare to something like that? And typically the answer is you don't. typically the answer is your technology is asinine. It's bad. Your data quality is suspect at best. Um, you make it really you make it painful for like professional for your members to access data, right? So what are we talking? It's like it's that kind of stuff. I think that's a big challenge, right? But at the same time, kind of related to everything is the MLS from the very beginning was not built for a team environment.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is something I brought up with, again, my MLS clients. It's like, okay, hey, do we have like something like team membership? No, it's all individuals. So the MLS was created in a broker salesperson environment, right? So you have the participant brokers, you have agents.
It's almost parent-child relationship,
A little bit.
at least around here, right? I can do certain things as an agent, as a member, but I can't do certain features because I have to ask my broker, my parent, to do those other functions.
That's right.
I'm allowed to bind the corporation, but kind of, sort of, sometimes. And if you look at real estate, it is all about that. At each level, there's another parent or a grandparent or a
Somebody.
super grandparent that's above saying you can do it this way, you can do it that way, you can do it that way.
And I think that's a problem. If I'm an MLS, like what am I doing for my team leaders? That's how I look at it, right?
But that's not the customer.
What's that?
The customer is the brokerage, or it seems that way.
Actually, I think for most MLS, the customer is just the individual agent, because again, look at how subscriptions are done, right? Like, and I don't know what that means. Like, are there different ways? I think there are. I'm certainly working on a bunch of them. Bunch of strap plans and such. Says, okay, let's look at this. Like, how do we go about tackling this? But it's a major problem. The flip side of that is this. The MLS at least has some value in terms of like, we're a data company, we provide technology, we, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what does a realtor association do? Right. Because they're not providing any data. And, and again, I don't know what the conversation is like up with you guys, but down here, I mean, we're seeing some real fractures. We're seeing some real seismic shifts going on in terms of brokers and agents saying, do I really need to be a realtor?
Is it voluntary membership, or?
Yeah, of course.
It's voluntary. Right?
It's voluntary, but it's involuntary because of the MLS.
Right. So
if the MLS,
if you're a member of one, you're a member of the other.
Right. So if the value of the MLS goes down because the cooperation compensation is shattered, then like, why am I paying for this realtor thing that I have no connection with? And it used to be different, right? It used to be much more of a esprit de corps, much more of I'm a realtor, we are the R, and I wear the pin and all of that. And I feel like you still see that a little bit. And it's definitely in the circles I hang out with, right? Because a lot of my work is in organized real estate. I run into that a lot more, but go into the random marketplace, man, I just don't see it. I don't see this like pride of like, look at me, I'm a realtor. I just don't see it, right?
It's come down. I think it cascaded down to, I was proud to be at Century 21, where I was proud to be at Royal LePage. And now I think I'm proud to be on this team or that team. I think, the buzzword 5-10 years ago was hyper local. And so I think, that's cool that brand exists, or that thing exists, or that other stuff, but that's not enough of a differentiator anymore. That is not a guarantee of quality anymore. That's not a guarantee of really anything. So it's like, that's the baseline.
Right. And it's the thing that realtor associates are really struggling with, right?
Yeah.
It's like, because in order for anything to be a guarantee of anything, not everyone can have it.
or it needs to be fragile. It needs to be, someone can take that away from you.
Yeah.
If you're not very good at it, or if you're going to break the rules.
But even then though, right? So I look at it very simply, right? I mean, like I don't know. Let's just imagine every single car in the world is a Honda, right? Then the Honda brand doesn't mean anything, because every other car is a Honda. Do you know what I mean? Like car brands only mean something when it's like, oh, most people have Hondas, but look, I have a BMW, and not everyone has a BMW, right? So same thing. I'm like, look, if every single person who buys and sells real estate, or helps, consumers buy and sell real estate, if every single one is a realtor, It's like everybody's a Hahn. It's like in order for that to be differentiated, in order for we're going to take that away from you to even have some force, not everyone can have that brand. It seems like just real basic branding. Problem is, if you think about the way that realtor associations, their business model, they're not really down with that. Right? They don't want to get to only 10% of licensees can be realtors, right? Because then you only have 10% of people paying dues.
Sure.
Yeah, so it becomes this weird chicken or the egg problem. And I know I've been working on it for 10 years and I don't see an end in sight. Having said that, perhaps something like what happened last year can change things one way or the other. Because I will say, at least in the States, a lot of folks for the first time really saw, so that's the value of a realtor association, right? Because they had the association go and lobby, governments to be like, hey, we're an essential service. You know what I mean? Like, we need to be able to like help people move, especially in these times. So I feel like maybe there's a window that the realtor associations might be able to go and say, hey, this is why we exist. This is why you want to pay us. This is why you want to be a member. It's not the same thing as being a realtor means something. It's a little bit more akin to, we're like a union for real estate agents, right? But if that's the value, then that creates whole other challenges and all that. So, but that's what I'm seeing.
We've seen a huge, in Ontario, our association this year has really shifted gears from their traditional role they've been doing and a great job of it for decades, education, along with, advocacy and all these other things. And man, they've really switched it on this year. For the $110 a year I spend at that level, there's no question there's value there. That play has been really interesting. But because they turned their mind to being my advocate, right? The education part was really cool, and all the other stuff they do, super important. But this part, I feel it, and maybe it's the environment we're in. I don't know, but I really feel it. This has made a big impact.
Yeah, and you know what? Fact of the matter is, like Tim Hudak, who's your CEO. I mean, one of the people I love and respect the most. Whether Canada or US. I mean, the guy that did come out of the world of politics, right? So it seems not natural and obvious that OREA would have kind of gone in that direction. But that's one provincial association, right? Does Korea understand that that's their real value? Do some of the other locals understand that that's the real value? And if not, what are you doing? Right. And and again, the members haven't had a reason to kind of challenge that or come up with any of that. But I could see that being an issue maybe throughout the rest of this year. As people say, okay, like I've been a realtor for 40 years, whatever, like, but what am I paying for? What am I getting for my money? And I think at least OREA could clear, we do advocacy and we got you this, right? This is why you want to keep doing that. A lot of the other associations, especially here, man, they have a tough time answering that question. Especially the locals, right? So the answer at the local level predominantly is, well, we give you the MLS. And that's worked, and it still works. I'm just saying, what happens if some of these big changes we're talking about comes into play and the MLS is no longer like the value you thought it was? What do you do then? And as far as I'm concerned, most of those guys they have no plans. Like, it's gonna happen, they're gonna react, right?
There's no plan B.
Yeah, there's no contingency plan. Hey, if this happens, what do we do? What's our value? They don't, they're like, well, we do education and training. I'm like, do you really think your education and training is better than like Tom Ferry? Because that's what the teams are hiring, right? At like $5,000 a month. It's one of those weird things, and it's just something that the industry's gonna have to deal with, right? So let me ask you guys something, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I've been doing some research into a topic, and it occurs to me that I'm seeing that you guys might actually be ahead of us in some cases. So here's the research. COVID happens, right? And it turns out both US and Canada have printed gazillions of dollars, right? Because obviously people are they can't go to work, relief packages, etc. So I know for us, our money supply went up by 35% last year. So 35% of all US dollars in existence were printed in 2020. I looked at a similar chart for Canada and it looks the same. Like the chart goes like this, right? Like
I
your
looked
money
at it
supply went
after I
up.
read your article, and
Yeah,
yours is dramatic, and
yeah.
ours is, it's not bad, but there's definitely we're on the same trend.
It's a huge spike. I mean,
Huge,
Canada
huge.
Canada also did like the relief packages and various
Yep.
funding also. So there's enormous amounts of money in the economy, right?
Yes.
And I've been talking, I've been hearing from you guys, right, and friends in Toronto and Ontario and Vancouver, like our real estate markets are absolutely effing insane. There is no such thing as affordable housing.
Period.
So my theory is that it has to do with the fact that there's all this money floating around. Like, so the thing I'm obsessed about now is what happens in 2021. Right? So we have all this money. We're not building any more houses. People are going to put money into houses. Price can only go up.
Yep.
Doesn't that seem right? What am I missing with that? Because isn't that what happened in Vancouver and frankly Toronto, right? Because you guys had the foreign investor problem, right? A lot of overseas money came into your urban markets and drove prices way up, right? And I know you put in like the Canadian government, the British Columbia government, Ontario, the governments have put in like, taxes on foreign buyers and vacancy penalties and stuff like that. But I'm like looking at the foreign buyer tax. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. But isn't the real issue? In other words, the source of the money doesn't matter, right? Like it doesn't matter whether a dollar comes from a Chinese billionaire or some super rich Canadian. Like it's still another dollar. And the issue is we just had massive amounts of new money coming into a market very quickly. I mean, is that a way of understanding like the Ontario, Toronto real estate market?
Matt, what do you think?
I was just going to say, yeah. What's making it worse is that our local government is only putting more restrictions on tenants, on landlords, I should say. We're going to a place now where we're going to be graded and things like that. Like that to me is only going to make the problem worse. You're not going to make it any easier for any sort of affordable housing, and that's. I'm looking at that as a very small level of affordable housing that would even be like, you're not really talking about that many. You're not talking about a whole new neighborhood that's getting built, and even a whole new neighborhood is not going to affect anything, right? Like, so
that's the thing I'm
I've been
curious about,
saying
like,
exactly this though, and no one cares. No one's listening about, if the money's on the street, it goes right down to the loaf of bread or whatever you're going to buy. If I'm buying bread for $2.50, $3, it's $5 in 5 years or $6.
right.
And, nobody's talking inflation. And I thoroughly read your article because it takes a minute to go back and forth in all of it and line it up with how I feel. And I can't imagine you can put that much money into the economy, have everything else go up and not have inflation later and not just have, the house that was 500 is now $1 million in a decade only because of that factor, because that's how it works. And I don't know, the economists don't seem to, and I'll defer to them and wait and watch and see, but no one seems to be saying it that way. And I don't know why.
But the interesting thing for me is that, like, that's the thing. There's not inflation. Right?
No,
Because,
yet.
right? There's not inflation. And the expectation from all the economists I've read is that there's no inflation. So, like, I don't know if, like, Vancouver, Toronto, if you guys have seen massive consumer inflation. What we have seen is housing prices, right? So, there's inflation only in housing, or it way more. Like, I think I saw housing prices are up like 300% in Toronto in 10 years.
Sure. Yeah. It's
Right?
a big number for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like 300%. Like, okay, price of bread didn't go up 300%. We know that.
No.
So that's what I mean. So there's this weird disconnect because inflation measures consumer products like milk, bread, gasoline, whatever. And those people didn't have the money. Like this additional money that was printed, they didn't get most of it. Right? The people who got most of it are like big corporations and people who work for big corporations. And those guys like us, like me, I'm not worried about the price of bread. I am worried about price of housing because that's the stuff I buy. And that's up 300%. So it just seems to make sense that way. And I guess the thing that I'm curious about is if we don't have inflation, but we have housing asset bubbles, what does that do to real estate? What does that do to the industry? How does that play out? Right. And I don't know, like it must be frustrating as hell to be underground because if you're a buyer, what do you do?
Well, Ottawa has a funny lens on that, and the reason that our Canadian Real Estate Association and CMHC, the government arm of housing, all stuff,
Yeah.
the national picture paints one way, and Ottawa is actually almost the opposite story. So while Toronto and Vancouver were having double-digit gains every year,
Yeah.
we would register 1.5%, 4%. 6 was a good year. Back to 3. Okay, cool. And then every 5 years, almost, if I showed you a chart, it's almost every 5 years, like a step. We have these double-digit catch-up years. So, but we're always behind. Ottawa has the highest average household income of any city in Canada. And we had some of the most affordable real estate, probably until this year. But I think even with our huge increase this year, we're still playing catch up. It's still cheaper than Vancouver, Toronto, and some of these other places.
Why is that?
We've just taken, so it's a nice boring town. Everyone has a nice job, but we don't have the C-suite money here. We don't have crazy, head office jobs, I think, that drive that. But we have a huge bubble of a really solid middle class, and it's certainly considered an upper middle class. But people are doing really well, but will get the same paycheck all the time. And we saw it during the pandemic, where we have the restaurants and the small business owners it's devastating, and that totally sucks. But our economy didn't really fall apart because everyone that worked in a government tower was told to go home, and they kept working. And so we're not feeling it the same way, but drive down Main Street and you see it, but you don't see it in the numbers.
Are you guys seeing the deurbanization thing that's happening here?
Deurbanization?
Yeah, meaning people moving out of big cities.
So I've had this discussion so many times. I focus downtown. That's my core, downtown condos. No, we're not. And even to the point where when our condo numbers leveled out a little bit, our board put out the stats and said, maybe that's why they're leveling out, even though there's nothing to prove that or nothing to show that. They said, oh yeah, that must be the reason why. Yet every single one of my condo sellers went and bought a condo, right? Like they're
just moving up condos.
Yeah, because it's a lifestyle, that condominium. So yes, obviously we had sellers that wanted to live an hour out of the city on a farm because they could have their own chickens and goats and not have to worry about seeing anyone for weeks upon months. But what we really saw was people staying in their lifestyle, but just moving to a more respectable place for themselves, for their lifestyle. So, that's, and I started saying, okay, am I crazy? Maybe I'm just, in a bubble of my own. And so I'd start asking people, and they say like, no, we're not seeing that either. So it's really interesting because it is happening in Toronto. It is happening in Vancouver.
So it's happening in Toronto and Vancouver, just not in Ottawa.
Yeah. And we're getting like, even before the pandemic, we would see Toronto sellers come here because of the affordability factor, right? They could sell their $1 million home and buy the same thing for $5 million. Right.
Is that the symptom though? Are we seeing, is that the deurbanization that he's talking about? Just it's a longer distance. The funnel is.
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah. That's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering because if I could work from home, right? And I lived in Toronto, and I'm like, okay, so I think the last time I looked, the average house price, and it probably includes condos, was like $850,000 or something. I might be like, okay, I'm never buying a house here. But maybe if I could work from home, I'll just move to Ottawa because that's still a city. Like I'm not in a farm, I can still have the lifestyle, like there's still restaurant, whatever, right? But I could just commute to Toronto and get paid Toronto wages. Like, is that, you're not seeing that at all?
We're not seeing the commute because I believe, and I could be wrong here, wages are going to be about the same. Where, that now, but the job might be different, right? So unless you're working for a government, like we have some tech here that's also in Toronto that's maybe headquartered here. But aside from those, I don't think it's the same. But
it's interesting. Because I know it's
really
happening in New York, San Francisco, LA. I mean,
Yeah.
people, Seattle, like agents everywhere. Like, yeah, we have, like here in Las Vegas, right? Our market is the hottest it's ever been. And yeah, big part of it is potentially the money supply. A big part of it is that. But a huge part of it, I know, is Southern Californians moving here.
Yeah.
Right. And I just wonder why we don't see that maybe in major urban areas in Canada. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's just like y'all don't care that much about going outside because it's so cold. I don't know.
I'd rather be watching sand blow by than snow, that's for sure. So Matt, maybe tell me if you see this. What I see is the people that I've seen personally spoken to coming from Toronto or attempting to come from Toronto, coming here, are saying the exact same thing. I'm going to sell for 1.2. I'm going to buy for 6 or 7, and I've got 500 in my pocket, and I don't have a plan other than I have enough cash, free cash left over to get reestablished. We can cruise for a year. We're smart people. We're well educated. We're going to figure it out. And we're going to, like, that's the conversation I've seen happening where they're not actually even necessarily, before the pandemic, they weren't coming here with a job in their pocket. They were just coming here and they know they're going to figure it out because Ottawa has job growth, good stuff, stable place to be, good place for your family. And it happens. So I think the, we'll just figure it out attitude was kind of a bit more of that story, where maybe it's the same where you guys are. If the price difference is big enough, hey, we've got a cushion, a 12-month cushion, easy, no problem. Can we find jobs? Sure, we can find jobs.
Yeah. No, I think there's a little bit of that, but here it feels, at least based on, people I've talked to, it does feel a little bit more like urban to suburban.
Right.
Because here it's just like, it turns out that, this is like a very typical story. Like, hey, I'm newlywed or whatever, or I'm living with my girlfriend or whatnot, and we love our 1-bedroom condo downtown and walkable, right? We just walk out our door and there's restaurants and bars everywhere. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. COVID happens. Turns out 800 square feet is not enough for, like for me and my wife both to work from home. It's like one person in the bedroom, one person in the living room. It's not big enough, number one. Number two, all the restaurants and bars are closed. So this like lifestyle, we're going to walk out our front door and we're staring at, boarded up door. Like that's no fun. So they're like, let's get a yard. Let's have more space. So I think that's what I've heard.
But they necessarily can't because of price change, right? Because they were in a $300,000 condo, and in order to get that yard and the 3-bedroom townhouse, they're lucky right now to get that for 5. They're lucky to get that for 5, right? And so we come back to affordability, and it's almost not affordable now to be able to make that switch, which is crazy.
Right. This is, I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is it's fascinating. But listen, let me try and add a little bit of value to some of the folks for me. Because I think when I spoke at Reality, right, like some of the trends that are happening down here that y'all aren't really paying a whole lot of attention to, like one of them was the whole iBuying trend.
Where's that been? What is there an update? Like, I feel like no one's said the word iBuyer since this time last year.
Well, I mean, I think I can't remember the name of the company. I think there's one company in Canada that's sort of experimenting with this. I'm like, experiment away, but fact of the matter is, Open Door managed to go public, right? And Zillow is still out there. My feeling is that they're going to have an insane 2021. I think they're going to absolutely kill it and they're going to murder it, right? And I think it's partly because of what we just talked about, right? When you have home prices doing this, speed is of the essence, right? Because this is one of the things I thought about. Okay, let's say I'm in that position. I could sell my house and then buy another house. If I sell my house now, like my house is 500, that house is 500. But if prices are doing this, I sell my house now, and by the time the deal closes 3 months from now, that other house is 550.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't have that, right? Like I can't have that. So it needs to happen like right now. Yeah. That's where those iBuyers are going to really specialize. And I think they're going to have a huge year in 2021. That's just my guess. That's my gut feeling. I got to prove it. I got to do some research around it. And so the only thing I think for Canadian, real estate professionals to think about is that this is not a fad. This is not flipping. This is real, and it's coming to you guys, because typically whatever happens here is going to migrate north. I think Zillow they came into Canadian market last year. It's going to be a big deal. The fact that they are joining the MLS as full-blown brokerages is a big deal. I think it's a bigger deal in Canada than it is here, to be honest with you, because you guys have that Treb lawsuit, the case that was resolved, which means a brokerage participant cannot be denied any data, right? And cannot be prevented from showing some of that data. Maybe it's not that big a deal when you just have a bunch of independent brokerages. The way I look at it, it's a much bigger deal when you have Zillow, right? And they can start displaying commission splits and, the so-called withdrawn, expired, suspended, all of that status, when they can start doing a lot of the stuff that we know that they're capable of doing. Redfin has the same capability. So both of those guys, I think, will have some really interesting, we'll see what happens with the two of them in Canada throughout the rest of this year. I expect they're going to have a pretty good year, right? Especially because of COVID made real estate move online in a pretty dramatic way. And most brokers aren't ready for that. They're just not set up for that, right? So that will be the other thing. It's specific for Canada for you guys to think about, because y'all in the last 10 years, like, you heard, but you really haven't seen this like online real estate thing come through. And I think you'll see it, I think, this year.
But Zillow executes on search, right? Zillow executes on eyeballs. And in Canada, we've had CREA,
right? Realtor.ca.
Realtor.ca. Powerful, good stuff.
Yep.
A solid choice for everything. How are they positioned to compete with Zillow? Honestly,
in my opinion, they're not. So this is one of the things I think I pointed out, and probably at Reality. If not there, then I might have did it at a previous one. I went and looked at the annual budget for CREA, all of CREA.
Yeah,
I want to say it was like 8 million, right? I don't know if that sounds familiar to you. I want to say the entire annual budget for CREA was like 8 million Canadian, right? Okay. Canadian. I was like, and they had this line item, I think it was for like technology or whatever special project, which means it includes Realtor.ca and and a bunch of other stuff. It was like 1.8 million. And I'm like, okay. Last year, Zillow spent, I want to say it was $500 million US on technology. CREA certainly has, Realtor.ca certainly has the lead now, right? CREA, yes, it's the incumbent. But I'm going, I don't know how you win if you're spending 1.8 million and your competitor spending 500 million. Like, doesn't that matter at some point? At some point, the fact that and I don't know that there's a real solution to it, right? It's like, how much more are you willing to pay CREA if they're able to compete? Like, is every Canadian realtor like, charge us $10,000 a year? We want to pay that because we need you to, like, I just don't see that, right?
It would be that kind of number. I mean, honestly,
it would have to be,
because Zillow gets to amortize that $500 million over all of North America.
That's right.
Right. So they test in Phoenix and all sorts of other good neighborhoods, and they figure out what works. And then by the time it gets to us, you could call it essentially free. Yeah. Except it was $1 billion to get to the free thing. Yeah. And so now, how do you get there?
The specific thing, example I could use with this, I was talking to a friend of mine, doesn't work for Zillow, but works for another big tech company. And he was talking about what it costs to develop an iOS app, right? But that wasn't the shocking thing. The shocking thing was what it costs when iOS changes, right? So, like Apple releases, iOS, what are we up to? Like 14 or 13 or whatever it is, right? So when they release a new version of iOS, and you have to change your app so that it works in this new version, he told me it cost them $1.8 million to make the change.
Wow.
Right. So this isn't even just the app development, which probably costs whatever, 100 million. Just to say, Apple's going to update its OS, we have to update our app. It costs 1.8 million to do that update. Dude. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe CREA does have that kind of money. Maybe I just haven't seen it reflected in the numbers, right?
Maybe we're using Canadian dollars and it's better.
That's right. So yeah, the short answer for me is like they're the incumbent, but I just don't see how ultimately they're going to compete with that, right? And if you're not going to compete with it, what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do? And I don't know that anyone's sort of figured out that answer. So yeah, so I think for your audience, it's like, because in some other things, I think you know, Canadian market is ahead of us, and some things you guys are kind of trailing. And I would say, you know, what we've been seeing over the last 4 or 5 years is the dominance of online real estate. And I think you guys are about to see it in a pretty big way. Right? Again, because COVID accelerates everything. You know, maybe before people were much more likely to like call their friend and, hey, let me see what houses are for sale, or walk around neighborhoods and stop by like realtor, you know, brokerage windows and look at a post.
Yeah.
Like nobody's doing that now. Everyone's just going online and saying, you know, I don't even want to see the house. Just show me 3D tours and I'll pick the 3 houses that I actually want to see in person. It's going to be like that. And most companies, realtor.ca, most websites, most don't have the type of tools and technology that big tech companies do. And that then becomes a determining factor as to who's going to win that race.
Because once somebody makes a choice on search, you know, I like this portal, I like that portal, it's sticky. If
It's
it
sticky.
works,
Yeah.
you know, it's one thing to lose a set of eyeballs from Realtor to Zillow maybe, or even to a, you know, maybe Remax or Royal LePage, or,
Yeah.
you know, someone grabs that eyeball for a bit, but
Yeah.
you know, it's theirs for a while. It's theirs to lose. And then, you know, how do you, maybe we're just as good. Well, just as good as just, I'm fine. If we're just as good, we're just as good. So, you know, losing that is trickier. You know, it's not a battle day to day back and forth, who's winning and losing. It's going to be a long-term shift there, is what I think.
I think you're right. And I would add on to that. The stickiness and the losing thing gets worse when you think about mobile apps.
Yeah.
Right. Because then it's not just going to Google and doing a Google search and, oh, look, Remax has popped up. Right. With the apps, like you actually download an app to your phone. And once you do that, unless that app really sucks, like why would you get another?
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of like the Uber Lyft thing, right? I mean, I was an Uber user for a really, really long time. It took me, you know what it took for me to actually even download Lyft was I got a new credit card that were like, you know, it was part of our bonus. We're giving you free premium Lyft. That's what it took. I was, oh, all right, then I'll download it. I still use Uber, right? I think what's it? I'll use Uber today. I'll use Lyft today. But if it wasn't for that, I never would have downloaded Lyft. Right. So that's how I think about it. So once I've downloaded Zillow or I've downloaded Redfin, it's got to suck in some way. It's got to, you know, or there's got to be something like we're going to give you free shit or we're going to do whatever for me to want to download a competing app, you know? And we'll see what happens, man. But those are the things y'all can look forward to. And all I can
check
say
in at
is
the end of the year. Yeah, we're gonna check in and see how we do with some of these predictions.
So here's the thing, right? And I'm like, you're at a great advantage because you could just look at what we did.
But we're not.
But I'm saying you could, and then just avoid making our mistakes. That you know, like you know, we're the canary in the coal. Like we blaze that trail, and you know what paths not to go down, and you know what paths to go down. Now, what complicates it obviously is stuff like government regulation and the fact that your competition bureau is way more active than we are, right? The fact that your regulators are way more hands-on than ours is, you know.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's like learn. Like, hey, let's not do what the Americans did. Like to me, that seems like a smart idea. It's a general matter. Just don't do what Americans have done in a lot of different areas. Seems like a smart thing to do.
So Matt and I were having a conversation about COVID, and it's, you know, if I have another one of these, man, I'm ready to not have them anymore. So we were thinking about, you know, eventually this will be something we used to talk about. Eventually we vaccine our way out of this. We, you know, there's enough waves, there's enough, you know, people in the community that have the immunity. And so we get there. And so my question to Matt and now to you is it going to be like when you have a cold and then, you know, you feel miserable for a whole bunch of days and you feel a little bit better and you're kind of a zombie. And then about a week later you say, hey, I feel better, but I don't really remember when it happened. Or is it going to be like winning the Super Bowl? And that's the day we did it. How do you think this ends?
Man, I don't know. I think And again, a lot of this influenced by where I'm at right now, what's happening in the US right now, like as we're recording this conversation. I don't think it ends this year, actually.
Fair.
I think because I think what's going to end up is they'll just get dragged out, right? Because we're already, at least in the US, again, I don't know what the Canadian policies are. We're talking about, we're going to give vaccines to the vulnerable and frontline workers. And then like, where are you on the list, to get the vaccine, et cetera. So I feel it's going to get dragged out, for us for a few months. And then roughly half the population here is like, I'm not getting that vaccine, I'll let somebody else be the guinea pig, right? There's a lot of suspicion. So, maybe by the summertime, we'll have like 30-40% of the population is vaccinated and the other 30-40% are not. But because of, natural heat, like, cause this virus kind of goes away when the heat gets up, right? So, we might see a real decline and people feel relaxed, they'll go back to work and all those things. And then maybe it comes right back in the fall, right? Or the winter next year. And then what? We're right back in it. So I don't know how that ends. To me, gun to my head, if I had to say exactly how this is going to end here in the US, I think it will end here in the US. Again, I can't speak for Canada because there's some different cultural elements here. I think it ends here because the American people basically come to a point and say, okay, you know what? We don't care. We're going to let Granny die. I mean, I hate to put it that way. I think it will come to a point where Americans will just say, you know what, vaccinate the elderly, protect them, but the rest of us just need to go back to whatever it is, right? And this stuff has to end. Otherwise, I don't see it ending.
Back to regular life.
Yeah, or just, you know what, you take the risks, right? So, people would say, well, I take care of elderly parents. That's fine, then you stay home, right?
Right.
Like, don't make the rest of us stay home. I think but we're not there yet. And I think ultimately that's the only way we sort of get over this. But on the flip side, I don't think this is something we're going to ever forget. Like, I don't think anybody living now is going to forget 2020, and I think we'll all be like, oh, the world changed then, like fundamentally, man, think about this. 2020 is when we decided other people are bad for our health. Right? I mean, like in a real fundamental way, we decided, hey, keep 6 feet away, wear a mask, like other people are bad for you. And I gotta be honest, like, there's a part of me that I'm just dying for someone to do this research, because the only thing I've seen is like media reports. It's like, what's dating like right now? If you're like 25 and like you're young, you're in Toronto, like you're in Ottawa, you're like out there, you want to meet people, like when we have this general sense that other people are bad for your health, like what's that like?
And I'm supposed to stay home, and I'm supposed to, right?
Yeah,
we're in a stay home kind of order right now. The kids are home.
Yeah.
Canceled. They definitely want you to stay home.
Yeah, but those of us who are like, who have partners, like we're okay. We'll just, stay together with, like I'm hanging out with my wife all the time, right? It's a good thing we like each other. I'm saying if I was single, like what the hell am I supposed to, like, what do you do? And how long is it going to take for that, right, to go back to the way things were? Like, could you imagine going to a bar and picking somebody up?
A random person.
Like random somebody you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like you just meet a girl, at a bar.
Do you have your COVID vaccine? Have you tested positive recently? Not you, but like that's what you're asking, right? In the bar, like.
Yeah, let me see your card. Like.
Yeah. But we're assuming you're in the bar. You're the way this works is you're already with 50 people. Remember this? Holding your drink.
Correct.
Holding your phone.
Correct.
This is it.
Correct. So the last bar here's what this means. This means the last bar I would have gone to is in Canadian side of Niagara Falls. At the reality, because that's literally the last time like did this with
I love Niagara Falls. I'm just not sure that was the best place to end your
like that's the last bar I've been to. That's shocking.
I still get the updates from the Fallsview Casino every month.
That's right.
Yeah, they wanted me to come back. Yeah, definitely.
Oh man. So I who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. We could be more optimistic about it. Who knows? And maybe the vaccine.
I know we have a few more minutes, and
Yes.
I want to ask this, and I haven't run this by Jody. Brad, and so it might not make the final cut. Brad made a prediction that Remax is going to launch or roll out an EXP-like model.
Meaning like revenue,
Virtual, yeah,
right?
like
Virtual. Sure.
well, more of a virtual, more of like of the virtual side, not the share
Yeah.
side, but like more of the virtual kind of
Yeah.
model in
Yeah.
its platform. What are your thoughts? Because I know you pay a lot of attention to what's
Yeah.
going on at Remax,
I do.
and so
I guess it makes sense. That's just, a little bit of investment of technology. But I rather think, and I got to remember Remax is huge in Canada, right? Like, to me, Remax faces a fundamental problem. Okay, here it is.
yeah, I love
6 months
what
or
you
so,
do about this. I love
it. Especially Nick Bailey, the chief customer officer. I can't remember his title. Chief customer officer, chief revenue officer, or something like that. As well as rest of the Remax corporate team have said, look, Remax is for the best. This is for the best of the best agents, right? And they've said things like, a Remax agent could work anywhere, but not every agent can work at Remax. We're the country club, not the social club. Like, they've made a lot of statements like that, right? So Remax is really for the elite. Okay, that's great. That's a wonderful brand to have. That's a great message. But then why are you recruiting? Right. And the Remax business model, as of now, is still based upon desk fees. Right. They're gonna have to figure that out, man. I don't know how else to put it, right? Do you know what I mean? It's one thing for like some boutique broker says we're on a 60-40 split, and our elite top agents don't mind paying it because they double their revenue, so they don't mind paying a 60. Like, okay. And we do all this stuff for them. Like that makes sense. All right, that's fine. But EXP is not, they're not pretending about this, right? EXP is not like, we're only for the best of the best. EXP is like, we want everybody, right? Like, if Glenn could have it, every single agent in North America would be an EXP agent, right? So I think Remax has to figure that out. Like, are you the country club? And if so, then you could do the EXP thing and talk about that. But why are you recruiting? Hey guys, I got to run, unfortunately. So, but this was fun. Hopefully that was useful.
It was a ton of fun. I really appreciate you coming. I'm very generous with your time and talking to your good Canadian buddies.
All right. Well, like I said, I'm happy to do these. This was fun. Maybe your members will be like, that Rob guy was dead wrong about XYZ. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to have civil debates and learn what I don't know, so I could, improve. So.
Can you give us a real quick pitch on your VIP?
Oh yeah. So for anybody that wants to kind of follow, I write a blog, and there's a premium section of the blog, which is where I tend to put more like the economic stuff and some of the quarterly earnings stuff, some of these conversations around Remax and Realogy and all these companies. That's on the VIP section, which is a subscription thing. So yeah, if you think if you find this interesting, definitely come check out the site. See if you like it. If you like it, want to throw me a couple bucks, I would appreciate it. That would be great. But other than that,
awesome.
I'm around.
Thank you so much for everything today.
Right.
We really do appreciate your time, your insights, and please stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you soon in person.
Absolutely.
We'll see you soon.
All right.
Cheers.
Take it easy, fellas.
Thanks, Rob.